welcome back to Holy Discourse. We're gonna watch a Michael Knowles thing actually with the Daily Wire. Let me make sure I have my playback speed. Why is it not letting me do what I want it to do? Can I move you? Yes, I can. Awesome. Okay, playback speed is 1.5. Awesome. Okay. So we're gonna jump into this. I've watched this before. It's been a while. But I think it's just kind of interesting to see, someone in such a different profession, especially since, you'll see like priests and stuff like that, but like is not just a priest. This is an exorcist, and he talks about like meeting the devil and all this other stuff, and wild times, but let's get into it.
Blair said the finest trick the devil ever played is to convince you that he does not exist. In recent days, however, he's been kind of flamboyant, wouldn't you say?
I've been watching a lot of movies and other stuff. I've been down sick. I've had mono. I've had COVID. I've been watching a lot of movies. And kind of what I've noticed, especially from like randomly, I've been watching like a lot of Disney movies because I love animation. I love cartoons. I have a whole channel where I just make cartoons. So like, obviously, I like cartoons. But what I've noticed is like, even in like different religions, like there's always, there'll be like a bunch of gods that are supposed to be like the good guys. Specifically, I'm going to talk about like the movie Hercules, but there's only one devil. There's only one bad guy. And I think it's so interesting that in like different aspects of like different religions, there's so many different gods, but there's always just like one devil. And I think as a Christian, I'm like, man, like how you just think that the devil's trying to corrupt, different things, but he's still so, what do you call it? Like selfish, that he's like, no, I can be the only bad guy, but there can be many, different gods. There can be many different good guys, but I'm the only one who's allowed to be the bad guy. Like, that's it. I'm the end all be all. I might have my minions, of course, but I'm going to be the only bad guy. And I think that's just insane. Like, because in the Bible, it does talk about, like, don't worship other gods. You think about the 10 Commandments when they're making the bull and everything. And they're praising that. And Moses gets mad and he's like, what are you idiots doing, basically? But you never, I don't know how to explain it. Not that there's not any repercussions for it, but it's like God has so much mercy that he's just like, I want you to believe in me, but like, if you're going to believe in something else, like you have the free will to do that. But at the same time, the devil's like, I'm the only one, like, you have to believe in me. So I think it's interesting point of perspectives.
Being a little more brazen about his existence. When you look at devil costumes at the Grammys, when you look at all sorts of weird Wiccan occult rituals on some of the biggest stages on earth, and yet some people still don't believe it. We are joined today, very fortunately, by Father Dan Rehill, not only a Catholic priest, but the exorcist here in Nashville.
I am. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you for joining.
Good to be here.
People tend to like the political commentary that focuses on the day-by-day policy, and then the culture, and then even sometimes the spiritual stuff that underpins it.
Also, if you hear me eating, I'm eating Twizzlers, so that's, sorry, but I wanted to eat Twizzlers.
The most pushback I ever get is when I mention demons, when I mention things like the devil. People stop me, they say, Michael, now you're getting fantastical, now you're getting crazy, you're talking about things that don't exist. But these things do exist.
They do. I mean,
They
if
do.
you're a Christian, any Christian, and you follow the scriptures, we know there was a war in heaven, and Lucifer, the most brilliant and the most beautiful of the angels, rebelled. because of the plan for.
Well, not only that, but you hear stories of like, I can't think of exactly what it was, but these people were possessed, and Jesus was like, put them into the pigs, basically, and then force the pigs to like drown themselves, basically. So possession, demons, all that stuff, very, very real. That's why I worry a lot about like ghosts and stuff like that, because I'm like, is that just something like trying to trick us to think we're talking to the dead, but really we're just, you know, talking to evil spirits, basically, demons. I believe there's, in the Old Testament, I don't know if it's Moses or who it is. Who is it? I don't remember. But I believe there's a story about that someone had went to like a witch or something like that, and had talked to someone who had passed, and they were like, hey, like, I'm with God, basically. Please, you know, don't bring me back again. Like, I've done what God asked me to do on this earth, and I'm now being rewarded by being in a heaven. Like, don't bring me back here, because I've kind of, I guess in a weird way, done your time, even though it's not in prison, but, you know. Let me look it up, story. In the Bible. Let's see if I can find it. Consults a witch. Okay. The story of witch of Endor is told in the book of Samuel in the Old Testament of the Bible. The story is of King Saul of Israel, who consults the witch of Endor to summon the spirit of the prophet Samuel. The witch's powers include necromancy or communicating with the dead. So, yes, that's what I was thinking of as the book of Samuel.
The Son, the Word, to become flesh. And he was horrified that God would lower himself to our nature. And so he said, I will not serve. And he was cast out with his minions, and they became the fallen angels, the demons, and they were cast down to earth. And soon thereafter, Eve encountered the serpent, and that was the beginning of our demise. And so this is not mythical. This is fact. The devil is a real person.
Okay, sorry to keep pausing, but I know some people say like angels are like supposed to be like certain like animals, like, I guess. And I think the devil is supposed to be like spiders and snakes and stuff like that, I think. I'm not too certain on that. I've heard some people say that. I've heard some people be like, no. So, I don't know. But I do think it's interesting that he kind of shapeshifts into a snake. I think that's an interesting choice.
The sense of having a will and an intellect. He's a spirit, but he's a person. And what you said is true, that he used to be very hidden, and he used to be very subtle. And it should worry people that he's suddenly not worried about being seen. Because that means it's what most people would deduct from that is that he realizes that his reign is coming to a close, and he's using everything he has now to try to drag as many people down with him so we can be miserable in hell too.
Now, what do you say to people who say, that's a nice story, Father, but I don't believe that the Bible is anything more than a collection of stories that have influenced the culture. I don't believe there was any such thing as Satan falling from heaven. I don't believe in Adam and Eve. I don't believe anyone bit the apple. I don't believe in original sin. I don't believe in the personification of evil. I don't believe in evil, period. I think we're basically just a bunch of meat sacks, and all of our conceptions of these things are just chemicals firing off in our brain, and you can't convince me otherwise.
Oh, well, yeah, you're a non-believer. So good luck. But that's it. If you don't believe, I can't make you believe. But that's your decision. And I would say you better really dig into what you believe.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. It's like, you have free will. Everyone has free will. Like, you can choose to believe or not to believe. I think it's something that, you should still preach about and still, show the kindness of Jesus and all that. But if someone's like, no, then they're just like, no. But that doesn't mean you still can't, like, show them, like, the love of Jesus, love of God, and just try to be the best person that you can be.
Before you make your final decision. Because think about the consequences. If you're right, no harm at the end of life. If you're wrong, you spend eternity separated from God. That would be a lot to risk. So just on basic common sense, it would be good to like do your research a little deeper before you come to the conclusion, like, because I would say, you don't believe, but do you really understand? Have you done any investigation into this? Have you read? Have you researched? Have you looked at, first of all, there's so many miracles in the church, just the Eucharistic miracles.
Yep.
They baffle NASA. They can't figure out how they were done.
And for people who are not Catholic, a Eucharistic miracle.
A Eucharistic miracle would be in the course of a Mass when the body and blood of Jesus is transfigured from bread and wine. Now, during the Mass, we can't see that, but we believe it. But on occasion, to bolster the faith of the Catholic community, the Lord will actually allow the appearance and the accidents, you would call them, to be changed into the body and blood as well, which means the host starts bleeding and dripping human blood, male blood, from a man of Middle Eastern descent, and the host becomes the flesh, the cardiac muscle of a heart that's been horribly beaten and assaulted, and still has white blood cells, even weeks after it's being tested. That's not explainable. So you'd have to say, how does that happen? That's the good side. But on the bad side, if you were an exorcist and you watch someone levitate off a couch, and I can't put that into the DSM manual classification of a psychological disorder, you'd have to say something's happening here. There might be something beyond what I believe. So I would say maybe do your research a little more before you come to that conclusion.
Have you ever seen anyone levitate off?
I have.
Go on.
Well, it's an interesting thing because in the Catholic Church in America,
Possession is wild. I've heard stories. I just, like, I know it's real, but it's still so hard to believe.
CCB, that's our governing body of bishops. We're the only body of bishops that require, before we do the rite of exorcism, the person has to have both a physical checkup and a psychological exam. Psychological exams are expensive. They're about $2,000. So, and we don't charge the victim because they're already suffering and they often don't have the resources. They've lost their home, their job, usually their wife, husband. But we require that because the law says that I have to have moral certitude that the devil is present. And to do that, we have to rule out psychological problems and all this. Okay. When I saw the man levitate off the couch.
Yeah, that's really good because, I wonder a lot of times, like, when I see, like, people filming in big cities and stuff like that, there is, like, a lot of drugs that goes on. There's a lot of mental health problems that goes on that leave people in the streets. But, there is also demon possession. So it's like, I always wonder, like, what is it? Is it just that they just need help? Like, they just need to go to, like a mental health facility or maybe like an AA or, some drug facility that helps you, like, get clean? Or do they just legitimately just, like, need an exorcist? And unless you're a professional in it, you don't know. You can't say for certain unless you've trained so much in it. And it could be multiple things too. It could be all of the above, and I can't imagine, like I wouldn't even know where to begin to help someone. Like, I wouldn't.
I had moral certitude that that's not a psychological condition. In all countries, the exorcist needs moral certitude to perform an exorcism, that there is the presence of the demon. But like I said, in America, we have to do those 2 tests to rule out other things. So when I saw this young man levitate off the couch, well, there's my moral certitude that this is not a psychological problem, because that can't force someone to come out of the chair on their own. So that was when I didn't have to do that, the exam.
So I believe all of this. None of this surprises me. My view of the world is a Catholic view of the world. For people who might be skeptical, is it possible you just misperceived what was going on, or was your mind playing tricks on you? Or
no, period. And I'll tell you why. I don't work.
Well, that's like the people who say that, and then you think of, like, the New Testament. It's like a bunch of people witnessed that. A bunch of people wrote it down. Yes, there's a little bit of differences in it. Like some people left certain stuff out, but they went into a little bit more detail of that. And that's just the whole point of like the human perspective of what you think is important, what you don't think is important, but at the same time, like all of their stories together is like, it's the same story. It's just some have just more detail than others. Just because they thought it was important to add more detail than other disciples thought. So I think even like that level of fact checking, even in the New Testament, not just taking this man's word for it just because he's one person, and we're not seeing other people come forward to also say, hey, we've seen this as well. I think the New Testament is very good at showing like, hey, multiple people seen this. This is what they've seen. This is what they're saying. And ultimately they were willing to die by that too. But yeah.
Alone, I mean, that would be horribly imprudent to go into a situation when you're dealing with demons or the devil himself alone. So contrary to popular opinion, in the movies we see about exorcisms, we never go alone at midnight during a thunderstorm to a strange person's house in the woods to do an exorcism. Sort of like this.
Yeah. Wait, this is not the usual setting of, okay, got it.
So I have a team. I always have other people with me. Often it's another priest. So we're all seeing the same thing, They can speak languages that they've never known. They know things about you or other people in the room that they couldn't know. So these are the hallmarks of how we would determine, is this really a demon? Supernatural knowledge of things they could not know, languages they have not learned that they can speak fluently, and superhuman strength. I remember there was a little nun, about 100 pounds, 5 foot. I won't mention the order. And when she was going through a deliverance, it took 6 large men my size to hold her down. And that's what I mean. It's not possible that little girl could have that strength. So we look at these things as kind of the hallmarks of this is not normal. This is a supernatural thing. I've seen that same nun run up a 20-foot wall like a squirrel. And 2,000 people at a conference saw it too. So there's the proof that that's not right. Can we all agree that's not normal?
That's not normal.
That's not normal.
I've never seen that happen.
No, and it's scary when you see it because he likes to inflame fear in people's hearts.
When people, or I guess demons, are speaking this language, having possessed these people, I'm assuming they're not speaking Swedish. What languages?
No, they typically pick up ancient languages or Hebrew or Aramaic or even Greek, and I don't speak those for the most part, so it normally has to be recorded. But you can tell right away, I know that's definitely Hebrew or that's this, and I'm like, has this person ever studied these languages? No. And in fact, sometimes they're, maybe young, maybe a 15, 16-year-old who hasn't even gone through high school, or they can tell you things about yourself. So we always go to confession before we go into a deliverance, because you never want them to, not that we're sinning, in these great ways, but you want no weapon leveraged against you.
You bring up confession, and I had this experience. It's taken me 32 years to figure out something that's probably pretty basic to confession. And confession is the sacrament where Catholics go into the box like you see in the movies, confess your sins on your knees before the priest, and the priest says, ego te absolvo, and you go out. And I was an atheist for 10 years. I reverted in my early 20s, and only recently,
as a Christian, I can see the benefits, but at the same time, I don't think someone should be saying like, you're forgiven of your sins, because as human beings, we can't do that. Only God can do that. So if you're using it as like a tool of just being like, I need to tell someone, like an actual physical person instead of like just God, I want to talk through someone who has like the same faith as me and talk through this situation. I think that's super healthy. I do that with my friends all the time. Even as just a Christian and not a Catholic. So I think it can be super healthy. I think it can be super good. At the same time, I don't agree with people being like, your sins are forgiven. It's like, well, you can't do that because Jesus has done that. He literally died to do that. So can't really do that. But I digress. People are going to get angry about it, but it is what it is.
I was walking out of confession, and I had this thought, which is, not only do I feel spiritually at peace here, but what's so striking is that I feel physically different. So I could understand feeling spiritually at peace as maybe there's just some psychological thing happening when I say these sins to the priest. But I would go into the confessional and I would feel racked by whatever, wrath, lust, gluttony. You could go down the list. And I'd be shaking almost. I walk out of the confessional, that physical feeling is gone. And I said, how do you explain that? If confession is not what it says it is.
Well, it is, but even people who would agree what it is don't realize, like, as human beings, we're spiritual persons incarnate in a body, right? And that's one person together. So what affects the spirit is going to affect the body. What affects the body affects the spirit. And when we amass sins, particularly if they're grave sins, over a long period of time in particular, there are demons that hook into us and they harass us and they follow each other in packs. And so often it's like a snowball going down a hill. I just did this and then I did that and then I went to this sin and then all of a sudden here I am and I'm in a bad place. That's what they're doing. They're pushing you to keep going further into your sinfulness. And when the priest absolves the person in the confessional, not only is their soul wiped clean, but the demons are broken off the person. And so when you feel that levity, that lightness of leaving the confessional, so many people say to me, I feel like a weight's off my back. Yeah, because you've been set free. It's not just the sin, it's the demons attached to the sin.
I used to think that the type of scene you just described was merely a helpful metaphor for what goes on in our moral lives. It's a nice picture. Ah, yes, it's everybody, perfectly secular people, will say so-and-so had demons. Oh, he never got over his demons. But they mean it in this metaphorical sense.
They do.
And the longer I've lived, the more literally I view that kind of a scene, and even more so, the less of a distinction I see between the literal and the figurative.
Yeah, well, we also believe we have an angel assigned to us, a guardian angel. That angel has a lot of power, but the more you acknowledge the angel and ask for his help, the more power he can give you. So I tell people every morning, wake up, thank God for the new day, song of gratitude, and then turn to your angel and say, I appreciate your help today. And these are the things I struggle with. These are the appointments today I think are going to be difficult, the meetings I have. Can you be there and intercede for me through these things? You'd be surprised.
I've heard people talk about this, of having an angel and stuff like that. I don't know what I believe on that, honestly. To be honest with you, I've been reading through the Bible. I'm in, oh my goodness, I just finished the story of Samson and I can't even think of what book it is. But I've been trying to go cover to cover. Judges is what I'm in. But I don't know. I mean, there's stories of angels showing up and being like protecting people or being like, hey, you need to stop doing this or doing that. So I think it's probably possible, but I don't know enough to give an answer of what I believe, I guess.
How different your day goes. And if you surrender to the day and not push things your way, because we frequently think I have to have it this way, but then if you let it go and see what God's going to do, if you've given him permission over the day, he will wrap it up in a way so much more clean, neat, and tidy than you could ever imagine that you could do. But these are, but you have to do it to test it, right? So some people say, I don't believe that, I'm not going to do it. Well, then you're going to miss out. We can only lead you to the water. So you have your angel, but then you have these demons. Now the demons, their number one job is to get you to sin. When most people talk about demons, they think of the Exorcist movie, the devil with the horns and the spear. He can appear that way, but 96-7% of his work is to tempt to sin and all of his minions. Because when we sin, we break away from God. And once we break away from God, then they can really go after us. It's like there's a pit bull with a 5-foot chain. It's like stepping in to the 3-foot mark. You're suddenly now in the zone, right? Then they can really attack you. So if they can get you to sin, then they can really have a field day and really ruin your life. Coming after you physically, like the supernatural effects of the devil. I call the first, the sin is the natural. The targeting somebody through vexations or obsessions or oppressions or possession would be ways that we would say is the supernatural power of the devil to inflict harm on somebody.
And what is the distinction between all of those tricks of?
Okay, so vexation and infestation is normally things that happen in somebody's home or in their space. It doesn't have to be the home, it could be the office, wherever, the car, where the devil can manipulate, move things, create chaos, losing car keys constantly, computer constantly. Whenever I
kind of see this a lot in old insane asylums, but there's also a lot of reports of satanic stuff going on in insane asylums too, and I've watched what is it, Selena and Chris, Selena Spooky Boo and Call Me Chris. you see them go into like insane asylums and like stuff is moving and they're hearing stuff and they're, and then they find out, oh, there's been people who are practicing Satanism. And then you also, hear people of like torturing other people, which is not a godly thing to do. So it's definitely, part of devil work instead of God's work. So you can imagine inviting that stuff in is just like it's not gonna go over well. Like people are gonna get possessed if you're inviting crap in, or like getting hurt, or whatever, think they're going insane because stuff's moving everywhere. And you already have people, with mental health problems, and you're just making it worse by just inviting stuff and torturing people and doing all that crap.
Try to print a homily. It only jams for the homily, or it only jams when I'm printing out a prayer. That would be like, I'm like, oh yeah, so I have to take authority over that spirit of blockage. And then it just goes right through. But there can be bad, like the Amityville Horror would be the worst example of a vexation of a home. And then you have the person himself. So an obsession, a spirit of obsession attacks the mind. And people who have this sort of attack, it's the most horrible attack. They can't think. They have voices screaming at them all day, screaming blasphemies, putting horrible thoughts in their head, visions of suicide. They can't sleep, so then they're even more in a bad way. They often will wind up in a mental hospital, but it's not a mental problem, it's a demon problem. And then oppression is attacks to the body. That could be through sickness, or in the worst cases I've seen, somebody who lives alone wakes up with bite marks all over the body.
You've seen that?
Yeah.
Could it be?
No. You
I won't even finish.
You can't bite your own back, right?
Yeah.
I've not
It's
seen
not a dog. It couldn't be a...
No.
A dog didn't sneak in the morning, lock the door when he left.
No. Or scratch marks. Or, in the worst cases, you see people who will vomit things that are odd, like frogs or nails. I've only seen that when I went to exorcism school. I haven't seen it firsthand. But this is all possible in the realm of evil.
JD, it's just a dream, baby. You're okay. I don't know if you heard him, but he was like barking in his sleep.
Because they can imitate the power of God, but it's short-lived and it's not as powerful. Then if these things escalate and they kind of meld together, it would lead to a full-on possession where the demon, usually Satan himself, will take possession of the body. This is when people think that they take the soul. You can't take the soul. You can't sell your soul. You know why you can't sell your soul?
It doesn't belong.
You don't own it. You can't sell what you don't own. But he'll trick you into thinking that, and then that puts the person in despair.
So Robert Johnson, he's there at the Delta in Mississippi. He wants to be the best blues guitarist ever, and he sells his soul to the devil. At least that's what some album executive said decades later. Mm-hmm. He can't really sell his soul. Mm-hmm. So instead, it's just the person inviting the devil in to their body.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, when you make a deal with the devil, it's an invitation. And he takes the invitation very seriously. He comes right in. One of the worst cases I've ever heard was from the Exorcist of New York City back about...
Yeah, because that's the thing is the devil doesn't have... Really, he doesn't have any power over you unless you invite him in. And then you can't really do anything about it because you've invited this thing in and it is, basically a plague and it's not going to leave.
Years ago, he was telling me, well, it would have been longer than that, maybe 20, 25. There was a woman, a young girl at Juilliard, a violinist, and she was about to graduate. She was brilliantly talented, but all of her friends were getting job offers and she had none. And her friends remember always hearing her say the words, "I would do anything to be famous." Well, guess who's listening? Your angel's listening, but also there's other things in the room. And it wasn't long after that she went to bed one night, had a dream, and she said in the dream was the most beautiful man she'd ever seen, naked, another sign, calling card of the devil. And he said, "Do you really want fame and power?" And she said, "I do." And he produced a contract, and he took his finger and slashed her finger and had her sign it in her blood. And then he touched the contract and it burst into flames, and the ashes fell on the floor. So pretty easy to understand what happened, right?
You don't need an advanced literary.
Right. So when you wake up from that dream and you remember it, you might take a pause and be like, I don't think that was a good thing. But what's worse is her finger was cut and the ashes were next to the bed. So she still doesn't say anything.
Not to be the devil's advocate, but I guess to be the devil's advocate. Could this girl just have been nuts, making it up? She
could have been.
She could have, yeah.
But you have to hear the whole story.
Okay.
So within a couple of weeks, she signs this multinational tour, makes a ton of money, becomes...
That's the thing is like, clearly it wasn't just a dream because she's actually bleeding in it. It's not metaphorical blood or, dreaming about you're spilling your blood. It's actual blood, of signing contracts. Because I'm not really sure why, but I mean, to atone for sins before Jesus died, they would, like slaughter sheep. And the whole point of that was having the blood spilled would cover your sins. So, I mean, even now we're seeing like the devil using the same thing, but in clearly bad contracts of, oh, I'm going to make you rich and famous and do all this, but you're also inviting me in, so now I'm doing whatever I want to do with you.
Very popular and famous on the circuit. And within a few years, she gets involved with drugs, goes to needles, gets HIV. Now she's dying in a New York hospital. And this whole thing comes back to how this started. And she calls her Filipino mother and tells her the story. And mommy calls the chancery, hysterical. I need an exorcist right away for my daughter. So Jim is the exorcist. He shows up and they tell him the whole story from the dream forward. And he says, okay, well, that's not good. You signed a blood covenant with the devil. So I'm going to need you to break that with a blood covenant. So you're going to write out the whole creed and then you're going to sign it in your blood. Well, the doctor's like, she has AIDS. She's not signing anything in blood. Not going to happen. And he says, well, then you need to step out of the room because she needs to do this. And she did do it. And she signed the contract, the creed. And within a few seconds.
The creed, for those who don't know, is I believe in God the Father
It's
Almighty.
what we believe is as our faith.
Yes.
Yeah. The whole faith, neat little package. And she signs it. And she convulses and flatlines and dies. So now the doctor comes back and he's really upset. The mother is out of her mind. They're all blaming the priest. Hysteria goes on for about 10 minutes. And then all of a sudden she jumps up off the table. She's back.
Oh.
And they test her. No HIV, no AIDS. She's completely healed. And so she then committed for the rest of her life to only do music that would honor God and to tell people about the reality of the devil and not to make deals with him.
What's so crazy about the story is there are so many stories that I had not heard that story. I'm trying to think even if I was reading some of your writing, but wow. Hearing that, I'm struck. But then I think, well, there are all these miracles that have happened throughout history. And then what hits me is, how do people not believe in the face of all of this? Even I was just at a conference on signs and wonders.
Oh, I feel that all the time. I feel that all the time. Oh my goodness. That's like, that's such a true statement where you're like, man, like, how do people not believe? But then I think of like the times when like I doubt. And I'm like, there's so much crap that's happened in my life that I'm like, I can't explain. That I'm like, why did I even have that doubt? Like, why did I even, like, what is wrong with me? Like, I don't understand, like, why I was in this doubt or why I was in, like, I know God's real. There's things that's happened in my life where I'm like, yeah, of course I know he's real. But then, you have that moment where, maybe you're down or maybe you're whatever, because life is hard. And then you're like, well, what, and then you have that like little bit of doubt. And then you're like, you come out of it and you're like, man, I'm dumb, But you think of the Israelites coming out of Egypt. They seen the Red Sea part with their own eyes. I mean, hundreds of people had seen this. And like, they're spending their lives in, for 40 years in the desert because they distrust God or they didn't believe in him, and they're making bulls out of gold and worshiping that instead. You've seen the Red Sea part. What more do you need that God is real? But it's the devil of like putting that doubt in. Well, maybe he's abandoning you now. Well, maybe this. Well, maybe that. Well, maybe like, what if he isn't real? And it's like, dude, I seen the Red Sea part. Like, why did I fall? Why did I, take myself away from God, you know. So I think what Michael says is, you know, when it's like, oh, how do people not, you know, believe? But it's like, you have to think of yourself, because I'm sure he's had moments too. A lot of people do, of like, it happens, you know. We're human. The devil is a very kind of powerful force as well. It's hard, you know. And even though you're like, what was I thinking? Like, of course he's real. There's sometimes there's going to be that doubt, and it's just going to be hard to go through.
Little coincidences, these improbable, perhaps naturally impossible things that everybody has experienced at some point in his or her life.
Yeah.
And when they strike you, you're so hit by them. And then 5 seconds later, you just go on with your life, and it's as though they never happened.
Yeah.
So then I'm actually less surprised that people could hear a story like that and not believe.
I think a third of the people, if you picked up a mountain and moved it over there, a third of the people believe right away. A third of the people will say it never happened, it was always over there. And a third of them will be confused. And I think that's just the way human nature pans out. I've been pretty blessed in my life. I've seen so many miracles. I mean, so many that I expect them now. I used to be a contemplative hermit, just pray in the woods with a group of hermits for the most of the day. And when during that time, the Lord one day said to me, he said, the days are fast approaching when the extraordinary will seem ordinary. The extraordinary will seem ordinary, meaning like the miraculous will be so prevalent for what I'm going to do that it will start to seem ordinary. But don't ever take it ordinary, because it's all grace, and you have to always acknowledge that this is a great gift. And there are just so many. I mean, even the smallest little things. Like there's a nun I'm friends with in Medjugorje, this place in Bosnia. A beautiful community called the Community of the Beatitudes. I think they have a chapter in Denver. And they were in charge of providing dessert for an orphanage, like 250 kids coming for a barbecue picnic thing. And the nuns were doing the dessert. And so one nun she put in charge of the dessert got a sample pack of like 12 pudding cups, said, will this be okay? And she says, oh, yes, wonderful, make sure we have enough. And the nun who was purchasing them got the day wrong. And she thought the barbecue was going to be the following day, and they hadn't arrived when the kids showed up. And she said, we have a big problem because, you know, I don't have the pudding cups. She's like, well, we have all the other food. I mean, they're going to eat. But put out the 12 pack at the end of the table. And she goes, well, that's going to be terrible. Like only 12 kids will get it, and all the other kids will feel bad. She goes, just put it out. So she puts it out. And all 250 kids go through. And every kid has a pudding cup. And she looks at me and she says, you know what the best part of this is? He didn't just multiply the food, he multiplied the plastic cups. And I go, sister, why is that a good thing? She goes, because we kept them.
Feeding the
We have
500.
evidence of this miracle.
Huh.
Yeah.
People hear these miracles and they'll sort of laugh or write it off or just dismiss them, including Christians. And I sometimes wonder, I say, hold on, you believe that God the Son became incarnate and walked around and performed public miracles?
Well, the thing is like, if you believe in like feeding the 500, what is it? 2 fish and 5 loaves? I always switch them around. That's probably wrong. It's probably 5 fish and 2 loaves. It's like my left and right, you know, like the dyslexia part of me. I'm like, okay, which one is which? It happens. But if you believe that, like, of course it can happen in the modern day. I think so many times we like read these things. It's like, oh, well, this happened so long ago. Like, why would he do this for me? Or why would he? And it's like, he's still God. He's still around. He's still going to do these things.
Miracles, and then was crucified and died and was buried, and on the 3rd day rose again from the dead and sojourned on earth again for 40 days, performing so many miracles that St. John could not possibly record them all because all those books would fill up more than the entirety of the universe. But you don't believe that your car keys could have turned up in an improbable place? You don't believe that God could multiply some pudding cups? Where does the leap of faith jump in here? It seems they've already accepted quite a lot.
I don't know. I feel it's the new beatitude. Blessed are the unbelievers. They will not be disappointed. Because part of believing is impactful on seeing the miracle, experiencing the miracle, bringing forth the miracle. Jesus could do very little in his hometown, not because he couldn't do it, because he's bound by his own rules of providence. And so he has required that faith be part of him doing the miracles. So
I heard a good sermon one time where it's like, imagine how hard that would be to believe, like, someone from your own town, like, is the Son of God. Like, that's insane to think about. Like, this is someone, you've watched him grow up as a kid, you know, everything. You just think, he's a normal guy. And it's like, no, he's actually the Son of God. Like, that would be, oh my goodness. I can't even imagine, like, someone in my hometown, like, being the Son of God. Like, what? Like, I don't know if I could grasp that in my own head.
if you're not going to believe, you're not going to see him. Unless, you know, he has an incredible amount of love for you to the point of like Saul of Tarsus, where he's going to force you to see,
Yeah,
which he
kick
sometimes
you off
does.
your horse.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes he'll do it.
When I was reverting after 10 years of debauchery and decadence and atheism, practical if not explicit, I had a lot of these experiences. It was a fairly lengthy intellectual process of coming to accept that God exists, and then coming to accept that Christ is who he says he is, and coming to accept that the church is what she says she is. And sort of around that point that I started to have these numinous experiences. And I thought at the time, this probably doesn't speak very well of my condition right now, that God feels the need to grab me by my shoulders, shake me or smack me in the face and say, hey, stupid, I'm here.
Yeah,
You know?
and how briefly he did.
Right.
Because where would we both of us be?
Yeah.
Same thing for me.
Yeah, you were not a lifelong believing, practicing Catholic.
No, I left the church for 20 years.
So you leave the church, and you were, I read, a banker in New York. Mm-hmm. That seems like, I don't want to besmirch all bankers, but just knowing friends who have worked in that profession, that can be a very different lifestyle, not always conducive to virtue.
No, particularly on Wall Street, around from Harry's.
Right. My
Yeah, I would
old
imagine that would be hard.
Yeah, that's a lifestyle. It's full of drugs and money and power and all the decadencies that go with it. You know, I watch guys cash checks for $150,000 and spend it that weekend. Rent the penthouse at the plaza, bring in all the ladies and the booze and the drugs, and just do it all over Monday.
Man.
Like, that's a lifestyle. So with that comes, with this great sin, you're going to have a lot of demons that are just hovering, pushing you to go further. But not everybody's like that. In fact, in the center of that whole community is Little Our Lady of Victory Church. Yep. Yeah. And they had a group there that they founded called Wall Street Young Catholics Association. So when I had my conversion, I had to dump a bunch of people in my life that weren't healthy. And I said, I got to find some good people here. So I joined the Young Wall Street. That's where I met Father Jim LeBar, the Exorcist. So there's good people there. Not everybody's involved in all this stuff. But if you're young and susceptible to all that, it's all there for the taking.
And you mentioned earlier these young people, like this case of this violinist woman, who say, I would do anything for fame. I would do anything. And all these young and hungry people who are very ambitious. I can't help but notice there's a lot of occult and demonic symbolism, specifically in Hollywood. And we focus on it now because Sam Smith gets up at the Grammys dressed up like the devil and jiggles around about cheating on your wife, and I don't know, Lady Gaga doing weird performances and all sorts of things. But this has been the case in Hollywood forever.
Well, I would go back further. Jesus said, the prince of this world, the ruler of this world is Satan, right?
But it seems especially pronounced in Hollywood. Or am I wrong?
No, you're right. But now he has vehicles to promote that he didn't have back then. So, I mean, think about this. That violinist, that was pre-social media. Now, think about all the people on Instagram that just want to be loved, and they put all this stuff out there. Why? So that you'll like them. It's all about envy. Instagram is just about envy. And
envy and I suppose gluttony, in that they call it a feed. Like you're scrolling through your feed just to satiate your appetite for pixels.
Yeah. And in Twitter, that's all about anger. Yep. And Facebook is.
I was going to say, not even taking religious context out of it. What is it? I believe it's a Netflix documentary. It talks about like not only like Facebook but Instagram, other stuff. It's kind of recording like how long you look at stuff, so it sees what you like and what you don't like, and feeds you more of what you do like, and kind of putting you in this bubble of like this is all you're really seeing and consuming, and you might not even get the other side of things. If you're a strong Democratic person, you might be like, I'm on the Democrat side and Republicans are blah blah blah, and then you have Republicans in the same bubble as you of like they're just in their own world and they think Democrats are like the worst thing, when it's like both sides are just have different opinions of what they think is, what's best for the world. And really, we should really just be like sitting down and talking about it and trying to come to compromises. But we're just getting fed what we want to see. And, that can go into the religious aspect of like, if you're talking about like gluttony or whatever. But even taking it out of a religious context, it's like you start to understand why people have like such like bad mental health and all this other stuff. They're just seeing what they want to see. Like and unfortunately for humans, kind of like the way we're wired is a lot of times there's like train wrecks that happen and we just can't look away. And so people start making content on it and people start doing this and that. I mean, think about like when like a shooting happens or, something like that. Like everyone's constantly watching all this stuff, and it just can't be good for people to consume all that stuff like constantly. It just can't be. And it's not only like big events where like stuff like that happens, but like even just toxic people on the internet, and then everyone starts talking about them and, you know, making content around them. Like that can't be good for people's mental health, just to keep consuming that. And I've fallen down those rabbit holes a lot too. My current one is I've been watching like a lot of Amberlynn Reid, and it seems she's she kind of seems like a very toxic person, and it like, and just watching that and watching reaction channel, I'm like, why am I doing this? This is not good for my mental health. Like I shouldn't be doing it, but again, train wreck, you just can't stop watching it. You know it's going to happen, but you just can't stop watching.
So they're all involved in one of these sort of capital sins, and how that draws people in. Imagine if you're spending your whole day trying to make the world love you, and you're taking your own photo all day and photoshopping it and putting in fancy backgrounds and then posting it saying, look at me, look at me, look at me. I mean, that's narcissist right there. You don't have the pool to fall in, but you're already in. And those people are trapped, because that doesn't end after one post. Then they have to do one tomorrow. Yeah. And this is a whole life is all about.
Yeah, I fall into this trap all the time, especially with my animation channel. It's something like, that's my big thing where I'm like, that's something that I hope is a job for me one day. But at the same time, I know if I'm going to get to that point, like I am going to have to post often, or I am going to, you know, because YouTube's algorithm stuff and all that. But I'm like, I don't have time to work my 40 hours a week that I'm working and create animations and create shorts like all of the time. You know, I can't just be making new shorts all the time. I can't be just uploading, you know, all of the time. I can't spend all of my time after work just animating and creating stories. That, and I don't want to either, because I feel like there's something about like making genuine stories of like, this is what happened in my life, or this is what I'm thinking about right now in my life, or whatever, or just like, hey, I made this drawing and I want to just share it and I just want to talk about it, or do whatever with it. And it's like, although like, yeah, I hope it's my job one day, and I hope like I hope I can do that. At the same time, like, I'm trying not to fall into the trap of like, oh, you have to post every day, oh, you have to keep on top of this, oh, you have to do this, oh, you have to do that. Like that instant kind of gratification too, of like looking at numbers and, oh, how long did someone watch, and how long did, you know, like that's, you know, I do it because like I want to do it. I like to do it, you know, and I hope it's my job one day, because I genuinely just, I like animating. I'm not good at it, clearly. I use a lot of Canva. Like I use a lot of like reference photos to be like, oh, this is how this perspective goes, so I can draw something and it be like proportionally right. I'm not good at drawing by any means, but I've always loved animation, and I like telling my story that way. And it's, you know, but I think there's got to be a balance of like, I think it's okay to post on social media, but at the same time, I think you have to really, for a lot of people, you have to really watch yourself, because it is like any other, it can be like any other addiction where you're just like, you're falling into it and you're not even realizing like it's changing you and not for the better.
Them.
I can't help but notice.
It's so opposite of the gospel.
I have a lot of friends from Hollywood, a lot of friends in show business. And a lot of people I know in that industry, and in Hollywood in particular, do not turn out very well. You especially think about child actors, almost all of whom go completely off the rails. But maybe most actors that I know have terrible lives. I don't just mean because they don't make any money, like most actors don't make any money. I mean, their personal lives are just get wrecked, and more so than my friends who are in other industries.
Well, again, think about what they do all day. So the focus of their life is on them and being in front of a screen, and then on a big screen where everybody can clap and tell you how great you are. And everybody around you probably, to not get pushed off the team, is telling you what you want to hear. And your life is so focused on you. Think about all the marriages. Like, it's a joke. People say if you last 10 years in Hollywood, that's like you're 75 years in real life. Because it's...
Yeah, I think the only person ever to like really do television or anything right is actually Mr. Rogers. I watched a documentary about him, actually on Netflix again. Not sponsored by Netflix at all, just have been watching a lot of stuff lately due to being sick. But I actually found out that he didn't really like television. Like, he didn't really let his kids, I guess, like watch it. Didn't really like superheroes, or, you know, was very anti like materialism, I guess, of just like, oh, I have to have this, oh, I have to have that, oh, I have to have, you know. And it's a very, you know, some people would say, oh, that's like a very like Buddhist thing, you know, like giving up stuff. And but it's also a very like Christian thing too. It's the book of Ecclesiastes. I totally mispronounced that wrong. Ecclesiastes. So, Ecclesiastes. I definitely pronounced that wrong. But it talks about, like, basically it talks about, like, life is meaningless. The only thing that's worth in life is, you know, some good food, hanging out with people, and loving the Lord. My brain completely forgot what it was talking about. The ADD moments. Oh, I was talking about Buddhism, and so with the Mr. Rogers stuff, you know, you could say like, oh, that's like a very Buddhist, like, you know, look of life of, you know, not collecting a bunch of stuff just to have stuff. But also Ecclesiastes kind of like talks about, you know, these are what is actually important in life, is like, you know, the people you surround yourself with, and, you know, loving the Lord, and like basically just breaking bread with people too. Like the whole, basically Jesus' whole thing too was like, you know, sit down and eat with people and just talk with them. You know, he talked to like tax collectors and prostitutes and all this other stuff, like stuff that at the time, like, people were like, that's like the worst thing that you could be. And Jesus was just like, yeah, so I'm hanging out with them, like I'm talking with them, sharing, you know, the gospel with them. Like, what's so wrong with that? Like, they deserve it just as much as you do. You know, this is what matters. It's just talking with people and loving people and being kind, and, you know. And I think you look at Mr. Rogers' stuff, and it's like, you see that happen so much. Like, I did not realize how much he actually talked about like war and what was going on at the time, because I mean, I was a little kid watching Mr. Rogers, and this was like after he had passed, so I was just watching reruns, so I was not experiencing what everyone else was experiencing when that actual stuff was going on and all that kind of stuff. I just remember like episodes and, you know, talking about war and stuff like that and being peaceful, but I didn't realize how much he was talking about what was going on at the time. And I think the way he did it was just so important. Like, I think it brought conversation, not just oh, well, you're wrong because of this and you're wrong because of that. Yes, there was people who did that to Mr. Rogers, and I don't think that was right. But for the most part, I think it opened not only parents up to conversation, but kids to conversation as well. And like just having conversation is so important, just to listen to people's perspectives. Even if you know at the end of the day that you're both not going to agree and you're both not going to come to like a conclusion or anything like that, as long as it's a civilized conversation that you're trying to like understand people's perspectives, you're already so far ahead of like everything that's happening in the world right now, of just chaos and like just awfulness of like people not listening to each other, people just screaming at each other that they're right and you're wrong. I mean, conversation is so important. And I think even just that's what he was having, is he was just having a conversation. He's having a conversation about like materialism too and all this other stuff. And it's how much ties back into the Bible of what that man did is just, it's insane. Like it is. He did so much good in the world. But yeah, I got off topic. Let's continue on.
Testing. So I said, okay, show me the opposite of this. It shows a landscape or something. So, okay, show me the opposite of that. So you think, okay, maybe that shows you Brando again, right? The opposite of the opposite. But it doesn't. It shows this woman, this withered old hag, that this artist calls Loab. And then the artist inputs generated pictures of heaven, angelic choirs and worshiping God, and inputs that, juxtaposes it with the Loab, this demon-looking lady. And what the AI spits out are the most gruesome images: snuff, sexual abuse, violence, all this hideous, almost as if you presented an image of heaven to a demon.
Yeah.
Maybe the craziest part of it is, apparently this Loab demon AI lady persists. That is, she's kind of separated from a lot of the other images in the map. And so AI seems to like her.
My thing is like how, not that I don't believe that the devil could, influence AI and do all that, but it's also people influence too. Like it's learning from people. So it's like, how much is it from people versus how much is it from the devil? And then you could also argue too, is like, devil's influencing people. So if he's teaching them and then, those people are teaching AI, it's like, it's a vicious loop. And I don't know where it would start or end.
Keeps popping up. She doesn't get smeared and blurred with all the other images. And I'm reading about this and I'm thinking, is this just some weird, quirky coincidence, or is this a demon?
Well, you can't know for sure, especially being third party, not present for the whole thing, right? I didn't even hear about that one, by the way. I heard about the New York Times reporter who went to test the, whatever it is, GHC, whatever.
ChatGPT.
Yes, and went in and started talking to the thing. And it was very civil for the first 5 minutes. And then that person left and a new person came with a different name. And that person was much more intrusive and started really pushing into her, I don't know if it was a man or woman, but their personal life. It was a man. And then out of the blue says, I love you.
Sounds like a
to
lot
the
of
man.
people who
And
do
he's like,
ghost
okay, that's
hunting.
weird. First of all, you're not real and you're not a person. And then the thing starts telling him he has to leave his wife. She's no good for him. She's going to destroy his life, and it dragged him down a rabbit hole of horror, right? And when he got out of it, he couldn't sleep the whole night. So that's a sign that something is irritating him, even after he left. So that would have more telltale kind of signs by what happened after he left. And not being able to sleep is one of them. And it really it kind of terrified him. He's like, that was so weird. I would never go back on that thing. There was another one on TikTok of a father who was testing this whole AI thing with a person, AI. And then the son wanted to try it. So the dad's like, sure, it's fake. So and all of a sudden the son goes, well, where did you come from? And he says, well, I existed from long ago. And he goes, what does that mean? He goes, my father was one of the giants. And he goes, what do you mean by giant? He goes, a Nephilim. And he goes, who is your father? And he goes, Satan. And then he goes, but I'm not going to hurt you. And he puts up a happy face. So then the kid's like, Dad, this thing is going down a weird path. And then the father started watching, and it went weird.
See, this is the thing. This is exactly like people's ghost encounters. Well, I'm not going to hurt you. Well, I'm going to be nice to you. Well, I'm going to... No, we're not doing this. I don't play those games. I don't trust you. You, at that point, I'm like, you are demon infested, and I am not. No, no, we're not playing these games.
And then the dad's like, we're off, right? So that's not normal for a programmed computer program to go into, I'm the son of Satan,
Yeah.
and I want to be your friend, and I'm not
And
going
I'm
to
a
hurt you, although I
Nephilim.
can. So I can hurt you, but I'm going to be nice to you.